Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to this edition of Conversations from the Trenches. Today, we are going to be talking about inclusion and integration, but from a very different perspective. We're in June now, and as everybody knows, June is a Pride Month. This is typically that time of the year when conversations and profiles and social media interactions tend to be rainbow washed, right? So I'm not hopping on the trend here. I'm not hopping on the bandwagon and trying to rainbow wash rainbow wash conversations from the trenches. What I am looking at doing is through June, offering up this platform called Conversations from the Trenches to members, to leaders from the community who can use it to have those crucial conversations that are so essential for us in the mainstream to be educated about so that we can be inclusive in our everyday lives, right? And today I am so happy to have a very, very special guest with me. I'm joined by Trevor Molife, who is the founder of Purple Hand Africa in Zimbabwe. Welcome, Trevor. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Reka. It's always a pleasure to be in your presence as well as just sharing my thoughts. And well, I had you talking about being the one to educate, but I always believe that education is from both ends. And so I'm also here to learn as well as to de-learn some of the norms that I might be accustomed to. And yeah, I'm excited.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As I say, I'm very, very grateful because I'm very grateful to you because I think over the past 2 years, you've had a very deep influence on my journey, in my journey of being a more inclusive human being. And I think for me, being a more human person, I think. I followed your journey for the past 2 years. I've seen the work that you're doing at Purple Hand Africa, which is incredible. I've had the privilege of interacting with some of your team members and your beneficiaries. And all I can say is it's changed me profoundly as a person. It's made me look at people in very different light, and it's made me look at inclusion in a very different way. So I am extremely grateful that you are here. And just for the benefit of the listeners who may or may not have read my write-ups about today's conversation, Trevor is a development practitioner. He's, as I said, the founder of Purple Hand Africa. He's an author, he's an editor, and through his organization, Purple Hand Africa, he's been running a number of mental wellness campaigns, mental wellness camps and activities to support the well-being of the LGBTQI plus community in Zimbabwe. Purple Hand Africa has also recently published an anthology called Faces and Spaces, which captures the lived experiences of the community in Zimbabwe. And down the conversation as we progress, we will have Trevor tell us a little bit more about the anthology and how we can get to it, right? But enough from my side. Trevor, I'm going to invite you to talk about your journey. Talk about your journey with Purple Hand Africa. Tell us about Purple Hand Africa. Tell us what is it about? Who are the beneficiaries you work with? And tell us about the work you've been doing over the past couple of years.
Okay. You know what? Interesting enough, whenever I think of Purple Hand Africa, I always think of one of the sessions that we had with you where you spoke about ego ecosystem versus ecosystem.
Yes.
And I can say that has been something that has really led us to where we are now because
Mhm.
it's not just about an individuals, but it's about an ecosystem that we're creating, and it's about creating that home that we do not normally have in the homes that we come from. And yeah, maybe I can also say thank you because we've also been learning from you as well as we've been growing. So basically, Purple Hand Africa, our work is mostly centered on mental wellness. And this has really been a gap in service provision when it comes to the whole LGBTQI plus movement in Zimbabwe, and not just Zimbabwe alone, because I believe that in most countries, whenever LGBT is mentioned, it's mostly about sex. And we are normally pathologized. So it's mostly about sex or it's about HIV and AIDS, of which I believe that we are more than what we do behind closed doors at times.
yeah,
we are humans at the end of the day, and at the end of the day, for me to be able to become that contributing citizen, I need to
yeah,
be in the right state of mind.
yeah,
Hence, we've been running a lot of expressive writing camps
yeah,
throughout the country, where we bring people from different parts of the country
yeah.
to come together and
Hmm.
just be in that safe space where they can just open up about themselves, as well as learn about some of the community members' journeys as well.
Yeah,
And at the same time, I also believe that it's not, my mental wellness also comes from a place where I'm also able to share about
yeah,
my journey. And
yeah,
hence, that's the storytelling bit, which covers our advocacy and awareness as well,
yeah,
which we've also been doing digitally. And lately, as you mentioned, we just published our book called Faces and Spaces,
mm,
which dives deeper into the different experiences from members of the community. And
yeah,
I believe it also speaks to our wellness, because then we're now able to speak our own stories. We're able to write our own narrative, as
yeah.
opposed to our narratives being written on our behalf by other people. And well, I think I might end up going on and on and on, but maybe just the last bit of it is that in our three steps that we're working on, we also have livelihood promotions,
Yeah.
which focuses on three E's, which is environmental friendly, ethical, and experiential. I guess that's Purple Hand Africa in a nutshell.
Thank you. I love the point that you've made about being empowered to tell our own stories, because as that old proverb goes, until the history is always written by the people who are in the place of power, right? And
Mhm.
until the lion starts being able to articulate its side of the story, the hunter will always be the hero. And I think you make a very crucial point, which goes beyond the community. It's something that is applicable to all of us as human beings, that we have to stand in our power and tell our stories. And that is a journey on which we need a lot of support. And inclusion is so crucial to us being able to do that. Right. But tell us a little bit about the beneficiaries you have. Give us an understanding of the beneficiaries that you work with.
Okay. Uh, okay, we don't normally refer to them as beneficial
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry about that.
beneficiaries.
I'm so
That's
sorry
okay.
about that.
That's okay. I don't know, like okay, so the participants in our program, because why I prefer the term participants, they are
Yes.
also they are also when it comes to beneficiary, I feel like there's a hierarchy
Yes, you're right.
involved
You're
with the
very right.
word. So
You're right.
when it comes to participants, we're all at par. And that's one thing that we always try to push for, whereby there's no hierarchy and everyone has okay, it's all about give and take. So basically, generally our participants that we work with, these are people from the whole rainbow spectrum.
Okay.
That
Okay.
is we don't really like to box ourselves as well. So I can
Okay.
just say these are lesbians, gays, bisexuals, non-binary, you name
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And like these are also individuals. Well, at first, when we started, we were planning on just working with young people that was going to be 18 to 25. But
Yeah.
then, like, as we started doing our programs, then the older ones also started complaining that they were
Yeah.
feeling like they were being left out, because
Yeah.
everyone is going through challenges
Yeah.
being LGBT in a society that is intolerant of our
Yeah.
existence.
Yeah.
And you find that maybe I can also paint a picture of the country that we also come from.
Yes, please. Please do.
Like, for example, just last year, towards the end of last year, there's
Hmm.
one socialite that was barred from entering Zimbabwe simply because he's queer,
Yes.
right?
Hmm.
So you can imagine, and this is a country where other LGBT people exist as well.
Yeah.
And it's a place that we're not really accepted for who we are. We are normally seen as sinners, or you're seen as a social deviant, and in a way, your existence is totally erased just
Yeah.
because of your identity.
Yeah.
And your identity is only put into one small dot, which is what you do in
Yeah.
behind closed doors, what you do in your
Yeah.
privacy sexually,
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
opposed to who you are as a human being. And
Yeah.
so these are the challenges that most of the participants in our programs go through. And you find that some of them, for example, especially the ones that are assigned female at birth,
Yeah.
a lot of them have actually been sexually abused
Yeah.
in a way,
Yeah.
well, whereby they say that they're trying to correct them,
Yeah.
and it's normally termed as corrective rape.
Rape.
But I
Yeah.
believe that it's corrective rape because rape is rape,
Yeah.
and it
Yes.
shouldn't be given
Yeah.
any different name.
Yeah.
It's wrong, and that those are some of the challenges that some of the participants go through, but
Yeah.
they're not really defined by the challenges they go through, but there's more to them. For example, when it comes to this work that we've just published recently, it
Yeah.
is not a work of one person, but it is a work
Yeah.
of all the participants
Yeah.
that have really managed to pen down their
Yeah.
lived experiences, to share their lived experiences with the world.
Yeah.
And there's so much talent
Yeah.
amongst them. So I can
Absolutely.
go on and on and on, but
Trevor, please feel free. You don't have to hold back at any level because you've actually led into what I wanted to ask you next. Because, as somebody who's been following Purple Hand Africa's work on, I've seen your videos about your art camps and I've seen the testimonials from participants. I've seen a lot of, the blogs that you've written. uh, every time I read something that Purple Hand Africa puts out, I get new insights into the kind of challenges, pain, and even the trauma that the participants or members of the community are forced to endure, right? And it always occurs to me that there are nuances to the kind of challenges and trauma that is imposed upon the members of the community. And this I get from your reports and observations from the workshops that you're doing. The insight I receive is that there is one, the most lasting, the deepest wounds come in from the most intimate circles, which is from the family and the friends and your intimate social circle. But alongside that, there is also the challenge of navigating life on an everyday basis in a society that is very hostile to people, to people of this community. Can you help us understand this a little better? I apologize for my ignorance because, for somebody who's in the mainstream, I think every time I listen to something that is on your channel, I I find myself taken aback because it never occurs to me that this could happen to another human being, you know. And I'm pretty sure that there are, for many people in the mainstream, although we very broadly talk about challenges and exclusion, the problem is exclusion is again a word. It's still a jargon, and beneath that jargon, the lived experiences of people are contained and often not seen. So, can you help us understand the lived experiences of the people in terms of in terms of the trauma that they're made to go through, just because they have the integrity to stand up and the integrity to stand up for who they are or who they, what they identify as.
okay, I hope I'm going to give justice to your question
I'm
because I see it covers a whole lot of layers. But anyway, maybe I'll just go through a few experiences that
Yeah.
occurred, and I also managed to witness some of them. I'm just not going to mention names.
No, no,
So,
please don't. Please don't.
for example, I think to some extent there are things that we really do not take note of. For example, myself as a gay man and
Yes.
also presenting as
Yes.
male,
Yeah.
these are some privileges that I might have as opposed to someone who is trans,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
for example, like we've gone through COVID, right? And
Yeah.
we all know like the restrictions that we have in terms of movement,
Yeah.
and like in most cases we had to move around with our identity cards for us to be
Okay.
able to gain passage to
Mm,
any
mm,
of the things that we wanted to do. And you
Mm.
find that, for example, with somebody who is trans, somebody that is transitioning from an assigned gender to who they are for real,
Mm.
you find that, for example, someone who was transitioning to becoming a male and being stopped at one of those police checkpoints, and they had to
Yeah.
present the identity, which states, which first of all has a dead name that they do not really identify with,
Mm.
and with a gender that's not, that doesn't show the gender that they are presenting
Yeah.
at present.
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
opened that opened way for them to be harassed, as well as being called all sorts of names. And
Mm.
interesting enough, last week, like, we were just discussing like the terms that we have for referring to the whole LGBT spectrum in our own local languages, which is very demeaning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
being called by such names in front of other people was
Yeah.
adding more to the traumas that they've experienced growing up, being
Mm.
forced to be something that they're not. And
Yeah.
so you find that, when it comes to the whole struggle of identifying as LGBT, it
Mm.
is it's not just one struggle, but
No.
it's
No.
struggles that differ with how we all identify. For example, if you're black,
Yeah.
gay, or black and trans, then our struggles are not really the same. So those are
Absolutely.
some of the things that we also need to look at and become compassionate about, as well as just understanding that, we all deserve representation for us to
Yes.
be able to change, like, the norms, the sort of norms which are really abnormal in a way that we get
Yeah.
to experience every day because of who we are.
Yeah.
And okay, I guess that was just one example, and
Mm.
maybe we'll go through the other examples as we go along in the
Sure.
conversation, if it's okay with you.
Yeah, sure, sure. That's perfectly all right with me. That's perfectly. I find it interesting that, thanks to my association with you and some of the others who are based in Africa, there's one of the things that keeps popping up on my radar is the amount of homophobia that exists and how vulnerable people from the community are because of this unreasonable, prejudice against people from the community, right? It almost sounds as if it's not very safe or to transact or navigate on an everyday basis, to navigate life on an everyday basis, right? Uh, can I just invite you to share a little bit about your observations about that
Observations about it not really being safe to
on
navigate
a
the life.
on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so firstly, maybe I can talk about, okay, for example, for all of us to be able to survive, we all need to have a livelihood,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And you find that for anyone who's LGBT, despite having all the qualifications, despite
yeah,
being talented enough for you to
yeah,
be able to land a certain post,
yeah,
you have to present in a certain way. And at times that might not be who you are for real.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
That might not be the kind of persona that you need to present for you
absolutely.
to be able to perform
Mm,
to to your best of your abilities.
yes,
And for example, also in a country like ours, which is also going through a lot of economic crises,
yeah,
the whole livelihood part is now limited to just a small bit, whereby you're only able to work for yourself, and
yeah,
you're not able to navigate into the whole formal sector
yeah,
because of
yeah,
identifying otherwise.
yeah,
And it's really, the workspace is not accepting enough for one to be able to become themselves.
yeah,
And it's unlike other countries whereby they now have policies that talk about diversity and inclusion, whereas in our countries, that is something that is not even included in the policies of the workplace,
mm,
because you either have to identify as male or female and nothing in between, nothing outside of the box of those boxes. And so
yeah,
you find that because of these boxes that are set for us, it becomes quite difficult to survive.
yeah,
It becomes difficult to earn a livelihood. And
yeah,
then secondly, we cannot run away from this. Yes, some of us might not believe, but at the end of the day, some of us actually believe in the Hamos being that
Mm,
allows, whereby we're able to center our lives and our beliefs. But then you
mm,
find that in some spaces, and especially in our communities that are really controlled by Christianity and other forms of religion,
mm,
in our religions, you are stated as being a demon possessed, or
mm,
not acceptable in a way.
mm.
And so it becomes difficult for you to also fellowship with others from the
Yeah,
mainstream community. It
yeah,
becomes difficult for you to even be in a space whereby you can now accept yourself as an equal person to the next person,
yeah,
because these are also the religions that we also grow up
yeah,
centered in.
yes,
And for example, just coming back to myself, and
yeah,
I'm sure this has also been something that has also been spoken about by many of the other people from the community
yeah,
as well. That,
yeah,
like growing up, seeing yourself as seen, seeing yourself as not human, but reduced to what
mm,
you're defined as by
mm,
religion,
yeah,
also
yeah,
becomes very difficult for you to be able to survive in a way that you want to survive as a human being like any other
yeah,
person. And you
mm,
find that there's so much depression that goes through because of that,
yeah,
because then you're not able to really accept yourself for who you are.
yeah,
And I think this also exacerbates even homophobia in itself, because
yeah,
you find that a lot of people that are homophobic, they're sort of struggling with themselves in a
yeah,
way.
yes,
It's a fight, because at times they might be seeing themselves in the next person that is living their own truth. For
yeah,
example, with myself, I think at some point I also had that challenge whereby,
mm,
just because I knew that I was attracted to people of the same sex, and
mm,
it was really difficult for me to see somebody who was just themselves,
yeah,
because I could see myself in them.
yeah,
And we justify that as being homophobic or
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
correct what is wrong. But
yes,
in a way, homophobia is a sickness that people
yeah,
just need to grow out of, a sickness that is destructive to even development itself.
it is,
Because
it is,
as long as not everyone's potential is realized, as long as you're not allowing everyone to
yeah,
participate fairly in a community, then
yeah,
you're going to lose out on some forms of development that diversity might bring along. And
absolutely,
so, yeah, so
absolutely.
I guess, yeah, we
So,
can continue.
so what you're, something that I'm picking up in this conversation is it's not just about the trauma and the challenges in navigating everyday life. It's also about the inner struggles of functioning as to your potential in your everyday life because of all this trauma and this attacks on your identity, if I may say so, right? Is that I mean, how does the trauma, how does the challenges of the environment and all that uh, uh, members of the community undergo from a through their lives, how does it affect their functioning on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, for example, like, okay, there's we do not really talk about depression. We don't
Yeah,
really talk about anxiety. Like
yeah,
in some of our cultures, they are not. We do not even have words to explain those
mm,
challenges, and you
yeah,
find that this becomes a daily reality that somebody
yeah,
has to experience. But
yeah,
just because it is also something that is stigmatized and
yeah,
discriminated upon, then you're
yeah,
not also able to state it out that, well, I'm stressed because of
yes,
ABC, I'm depressed because of
yeah,
ABC.
yeah,
And in a way, it sort of avoids you from, it stops you
yeah,
from living life to its fullness.
yeah,
And I guess that's what also causes many other LGBT people to end up finding, having suicidal ideation,
yeah,
and
yeah,
some of them actually ending up committing suicide.
Yeah.
because they do not have an outlet.
Yeah. No, the reason I ask this question is because, as you know, as a very close friend, you know that I suffer from anxiety. I manage anxiety. At different points in my life, I've managed PTSD and I've managed depression as well. So I know, like in my experience, that's a very hard, cold, lonely, and scary place to be in. So, I cannot imagine how much harder it must be when you are barricaded, you're not allowed to access companionship or connection or even the support that you need to function. I think that's one of, I mean, it 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 moves me at a certain level. I find it extremely hard to digest, to be, because I have, I know that if I'm not well, I can pick up the phone, and my gender or my sexuality will never be a barrier to me getting the help that I need. It's only about me having to worry about the stigma of mental health. However, I cannot imagine ever, of any human being being in a situation where that avenue is close to them. It's just, I don't know, it's incredible. It's really, really incredible. It's hard.
Okay,
It's very
I'm
hard.
trying I'm also, in as much as the reality is so dark, but in a way, maybe I can also just bring a bit of a lighter cloud to this
Thank you.
whole
Please do,
situation.
because right now I feel a little heavy with this, with that realization.
Because, like, yes, we might have all those difficulties, all those
Yeah,
psychological challenges, but then
yeah,
at the end of the day, if you've noticed, like, I always used to ask this question, like, why are we so creative as
yeah,
the LGBTQ community?
yeah,
And I guess this is some resilience in us that we should actually
yeah,
celebrate. That,
yes,
what, our creativity actually comes from the trauma that we bear growing up, from the trauma that we experience in our day-to-day lives.
yeah,
And in a way, for you to be able to step out of it,
yeah,
you only have yourself to rely on in most
yeah,
cases.
yeah,
And how do we do this? We do this in our creativity, we do this through writing, we do this through
yeah,
drawing, and we also do it through poetry and even music. And
yeah,
in a way, we also bring color to the world
yeah,
because of the lonely place that will be coming from.
yeah.
So in a way, it's not always a sad story, but
No, no,
I
it isn't. It isn't. I agree with you because I think the ability to leverage our struggles to really showcase our shared humanity for the world to see. I think that's one of the most powerful creations that a human being can be capable of, and I think that's one of the reasons why I really, really, admire the work you're doing at Purple Hand Africa, because it's not easy, and in your way, you're coloring the world rainbow in a very positive and inspiring way for many of us. Precious is proud of you, Trevor, and the work you're doing. Precious, thank you so much for joining us today. Very, very glad to see you here. So, Trevor, uh, my next question to you is actually for me to learn. And I know you cannot be a spokesperson for every participant and every person in the community, but I would like to invite you to share your observations of what you have noticed a privilege playing out amongst your participants in your camps, particularly with respect to gender. Have you have you observed privilege come into play at any level, particularly with respect to gender, in the way the world understands it?
okay. So what I've noticed, okay, in as much as I'm also not going to, you say that I'm not going to be a spokesperson of everyone, but
No.
what I've noticed is that the trends that are normally there, that, what, if you are presenting with the gender you are assigned to at birth, in
Yeah.
most cases you find that most of these individuals are actually individuals that have some sort of academics,
Mm.
academic, maybe they're graduates in a way. They've
Yeah.
graduated, maybe gone up to tertiary level and you name it,
Yeah.
and are also able to survive and maybe have a job or anything like that. But you
Mm.
find that when it comes to the trans
yeah,
presenting individuals, most of them,
mm,
it's either they wouldn't have managed to go up to a
yeah,
certain stage in
yeah,
education.
yeah,
And in most cases, even finding a job or even being able to find some self-employment, because at the end of the day, it is difficult for them
yeah,
to practice any form of economics without being judged for
yeah,
how they present.
yeah,
And another thing that I also noticed is that, you know what, like in our camps, we try to invite people from all parts of the community. That
yeah,
is, some coming from rural areas as well as
yeah,
some coming from the urban areas.
yeah,
And there's always that difference amongst
mm,
them, because,
mm,
especially with the ones from the rural communities, some of
yeah,
them actually feel like they are alone, like they are
yeah,
one in a million. They don't
mm,
even know that there's other people that are like them from outside, and
yeah,
they actually do not have that much exposure to the outside world.
yeah,
And it is quite sad, because it feels like with most organizations that work with LGBTQ communities
mm,
actually operate from urban areas,
yeah,
and very few actually penetrate deeper into the rural communities.
mm,
And those are some of the struggles, those are some of the narratives that we actually do not know much about.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
guess that's also a point where I also get to feel that I'm a bit privileged, because one, I'm mask presenting and I'm from an urban setup. And
yeah,
so my struggles might actually not be the same as the others.
yeah,
And yeah, I think it will be interesting to invite maybe some of the participants from our projects to also just come and
yeah,
speak their
yeah,
own realities. But
yeah,
also, I think the good thing about it is that I'm also going to go back into Faces and Spaces, because it's also presenting like different stories from different parts of the
yeah,
community.
yeah,
And some of the things that we might
mm,
take for granted
mm,
are actually some things that others do not really have the privy of taking
yeah,
for granted, and they are actually limited because of
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. Like we already know that language, or just an education that allows you to speak in English itself is such a huge privilege, because uh, a lot of times you need that privilege of language to communicate and get, in many ways, to grow to do well at work, to get the support you need. Maybe the best resources that will actually help you be your best self is requires you to have this privilege of language, which you may not really have. So, and I'm just speaking on a very tiny, minuscule aspect that came to my mind, but I completely hear what you're saying about this, right? So we've talked so much about gender and sexuality, and we've also talked, I think a little bit earlier, we were talking about homophobia and how people aren't meeting themselves very deeply, which is possibly the root for their homophobia, right? And it puzzles me, and I put myself in the group. When I say puzzle, it puzzles me, is there have been so many conversations about LGBTQI plus in the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm not talking about Zimbabwe in general. I'm talking about the world at large, right?
Mhm, mhm.
There's a lot of conversations. There's seemingly a lot of support, right? But still, despite all the advances, the world still thinks in very rigidly either or, he or she, at best a third gender perspective, right? Uh, for me, again, when I think about it, I do the same thing. Honest confession here, I tend to do the same thing, and I have to catch myself many times, which is why I want to learn more and understand more. But I think when I looked into myself, one of the things that struck me was that the reason I tend to think as he and she, male versus female, is because that's the only thing I've ever known in all my life. I received this knowledge and information from the moment I was born. It is an identity which has been thrust upon me, which I embraced without ever questioning it, because As a baby, you don't question. You just, you
Question
just want to,
therefore.
yeah, you're not in a position to question. All you want to do is eat and sleep and, just be functional. That's it. And by the time you get to a point of where you're questioning and you're forming your identity, which is usually, it's not in your early years, it's not in the first 10 years, it's much after that. The it's already carved into you,
Mhm.
this, this binary way of thinking. And it is a challenge. However, unfortunately, this limited perspective is what the world now holds as an absolute truth, right? It's not the absolute truth because the reality is different. Tell us about the reality. Tell us the reality about the reality of gender and sexuality as you have observed it unfold in the world.
The reality of gender and sexuality. Okay, in a way, when it comes to this part, I feel like the LGBT community is actually a bit more privileged
Hmm.
because we're able to live outside of the boxes, outside of the binaries that have been set by
Yeah,
society.
yeah,
Because in a way, I think we start questioning ourselves. Most of us actually start questioning ourselves from a very young age.
yeah.
And it becomes a journey that you get to experience as well as, like, okay, interesting enough, like the last time we did sexuality and gender a questionnaire whereby we were just asking some of our participants, like, at what age did you start realizing that you're attracted to the same sex?
Mm,
At the age of 6, what sex were you more attracted to? And there's sort of like a measurement from 1 to 6. And you
mm,
find that with all those questions, they just don't stick on one answer, but it's
yeah,
more like it moves from one end to the other end and maybe to the
yeah,
middle and you name it. And
yeah,
I think it's also a privilege that I have in a way because I've
mm,
managed to experience my life as humanly possible as I can,
mm,
in a way
mm,
that I did not just in a way. Okay, firstly, I had boxed myself in a way
mm,
that I thought I was gay,
mm,
right?
mm,
But later with time, and also being able to just embrace, well, the thing is patriarchy. Okay, let's not run away from patriarchy. Patriarchy is
absolutely.
what forces us to also
Yeah,
think in terms of male and female,
yeah,
whereby
yeah,
male has more power than female. And you
yes,
find that also identifying as a gay person
yeah,
and being able to embrace my other side, then
yeah,
I was able to just see that, you know what, it's not just about being in one box or the other.
yes, yeah,
A person can also be able to oscillate from one place to the next. And gender is quite fluid, in as
yeah,
much as sexuality is also fluid.
yep,
And these are realities that we just need to experience in our own
yeah,
lives. And I think maybe given the chance on one of your sessions, maybe you can also bring in this questionnaire and just get the listeners to also just fill it in and it just come to reality with who they are as individuals and the journeys that they've also gone through in terms of gender and sexuality, because it's just not one box
no,
or two
no,
boxes.
no,
There is more
no.
to that.
So before we go any further, what is the question that you want my listeners to think about, at least? Because instead of me asking them, you can ask them. The space is yours. Please feel free to put the question out in the air for whoever is listening to think about it.
You're putting me on the spot.
Oh, well, honestly, Trevor, let me weigh in here, okay?
Hmm.
I don't see this segment of the conversation as something that is exclusive to the community. And the reason I
Hmm.
say this is because we spoke about patriarchy. Patriarchy very clearly, segregates people into two boxes: man,
Hmm.
woman, right? And power is, depending on the social structure, power is assigned to one group of people. In most of the societies across the world, the power is assigned to the men. There are pockets, rare pockets like the community I come from, where power is assigned to the women, right? Either way, there is a problem in giving one set of people's power over everybody else purely on the basis of their gender and sexuality. There is a problem. And
Very.
the problem also lies in the fact that to be eligible for this power, that our patriarchy or matriarchy confers upon you, you need to step up as a stereotype. So it's not enough that you identify as a man, you present as a man, you have to bring in certain behaviors, right? The
And
same
there's a
goes for women.
huge danger when it comes to stereotypes because
Yeah,
they
you
use the
know,
word static and okay.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
so the reason I raise this point is because most of my work focus is with women, right? And I
Hmm.
can see with a lot of women who come into the workforce, I can see the struggle is real because there is a certain stereotype that most women are carrying on their back as monkeys, literally, right? But at the same time, when they engage on a day-to-day basis, particularly at work, it's they're not there's there are many different aspects of their personality and their being that comes into play which cannot be classified as masculine or feminine. You just cannot, right? So
Hmm.
that's where that's where I think this question that you ask is very pertinent for all humanity, because are you being a certain way because you think that makes you a manly man or a feminine woman or whatever else it is? What is the standard you're holding yourself to? It's not just about you being, identifying or being, or, saying I belong to a certain gender. There are nuances even within your interpretation of gender that
Hmm.
affects the way you're developing, you're growing, and you're showing up in the world. And any question that makes you really question why you do what you do and come to a space of balance with who you are is, I think, a good question for people to think about. That's just my take on it.
Definitely. And that one question would be quite okay. It is quite difficult to find just one question, but I'll try to give it one. So, if there's just one question that I would like people to just ask themselves is who am I as a human before gender or sexuality?
Yeah.
Who am I as a person? And I believe that in every human there is that humanity inside
Yes.
of all of us that
Yes.
feels for the other human, which we normally refer to as ubuntu. And I think
Yes.
it cross cuts in all globally actually.
Of course.
So just that one question: who am I as a human before gender or sexuality or any other identity?
Yeah.
And I think once we have an answer for that, then we're able to live in harmony, as well as we're able to embrace each other. And by embracing each other, I believe we're also able to develop ourselves even more than we experience at the moment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I'll just leave it there.
I don't even know why you were worried about that question, because the question, who am I, interestingly, is the one question that most spiritual seekers ask themselves over and over again. That's a spiritual quest, right? So, you know, I mean, if you look at it, if you really look at it, peel back the layers of the onion, what do you get? You get that all the questions that you're asking in your camps that pertain to gender and sexuality have a spiritual root in it, and I think this is a question all of us should ask, because more than, yeah, Precious is validating it, saying, yep, who am I? So there, see, there, you worried unnecessarily.
Thank you,
That's a
Precious,
good
for
question.
listening to this.
That's a great question. But I think that's a very important question for all of us to ask, because when we drill down to, the basics, we'll realize we are not our bodies, and we are not our gender, and we are not that. There's something bigger, wider, and we are all connected at the end of the day. Humanity is one, and that's that's there's no escaping that truth. Yeah, Rania is here, who says you're amazing, sending you much, much, much love. Well, there you go, Trevor.
Busy,
I can
busy.
see. Yeah, visu, visu. Okay, so last but not the least, since we are leaving people with the question saying, who am I? Tell us, who is an ally, and what does it mean to be an ally?
Hmm. Interesting enough, like, because when I saw that question at some point, I actually tried to Google about it and crack my head and think out about it and all that. But at the end of the day, you know what? there are no set rules to being an ally.
Hmm.
Being an ally, I believe, is just digging deeper into your human self
Hmm.
and allowing yourself to just be human in a way that you understand that you do not operate alone in an ecosystem, but you operate in an ecosystem. You
Yeah.
coexist with others,
Yeah.
right? So it's not just about carrying the flag, making so much noise that I'm an ally. It's not
No.
about what you do, but it's about who you are at the end of the day, because who you are transcends into what you're going to do for the next person, transcends into how you're going to change mindsets of some of the homophobic people
Yeah.
and to just get them to that point of just accepting the next person as being human as much as they are. So basically, it's just coming to that center of
Mm.
yourself. I'm
Mm.
sorry, I'm bringing it back to that other previous question, but then that
By all means, by
that
all
is
means.
my true definition of being an ally. It all comes from within, not from without, and not from your actions, but comes from who you are inside.
Yeah. No, I think you've nailed it, Trevor. Because I hold myself as an example for this. I think 3 years back, I was one of those people who was, well, I didn't carry a flag, but I did plaster the rainbow quite liberally across my social profiles. And I was quick to go out and talk about human rights and stuff like that. I think, having you in my life, having some other wonderful people in my life changed me as a human being completely. Not in the context of just how I showed up in the world. It made me meet myself very deeply and ask myself, who am I? And when I went into that journey, and you've been a part of this journey of mine, because there have
I'm
been times when
humbled.
I've cried on your shoulder and I've sent you my art and all of that stuff as I peel back my layers. But I think the most important thing I realized was, I don't feel good hating people. I don't feel good having conflict. I don't feel that I'm happiest when when I
Mhm.
have a loving relationship with people and I'm connected to people. And I think deep down, if we all scratch the surface, that's what we want: human connection. We want love, we want acceptance, we want safety, we want freedom, and that's where it goes to. So I love that you've asked, you've brought it down to this very point. But once again, I'm going to put you on the hot seat and I'm going to ask you this question: how can we all be better allies?
Hmm. How can you be better allies? Well, being a better ally is standing up for the truth, standing up for humanity, and not being afraid to be judged by the next person just
Hmm.
because I'm going to state that I support LGBT people or I support humans in their diversity. And well, the thing is, that moment when you're not afraid to stand up and say it,
Yeah,
then you're being a true ally and not just saying it, but also putting it into practice.
yeah. What does by putting it into practice mean? What does that look like?
Well, it looks like being open to learning about others and also being open to sharing about yourself with others. It's about giving that space whereby we're able to share our lived experiences and
Yeah,
not being judgmental, but being accepting and being open enough
yeah,
to trying to do something about it and changing maybe some of the ways that you've been holding as normal, which
yeah,
might be abnormal.
yeah. Yeah, it's
So,
not normal.
like,
It's not normal. It's not
it's not
normal.
normal at
It's
all.
not.
The whole world, okay, yeah, story
I
for
mean, no,
another
no.
day.
I mean, I think it's okay for us to talk about it's not normal because we keep talking about change as being the only constant in life. And are we really going to say that just one way of looking at gender through centuries is life? There's an inherent contradiction in what we are talking about living life, this fundamental philosophy of change being the cornerstone of life, and the way we have been approaching certain important aspects of human identity. So it's good for us to question. It's really good for us to question and learn and stay open to it. And we may arrive at the space of saying, okay, this is not for me, and that's
Mhm.
okay too. But that does that difference does not give me the right to go out and hurt another human being. That's,
Yes.
I think for me, that's crucial. We cannot go out and hurt somebody, any life, just because they're different.
But you know what? I actually think that once people start questioning,
Yeah,
then it will definitely help to make the world a better place.
yeah,
Because you find that so many people that have changed the world, so many people that have brought tangible change and
yeah,
have defined humanity in the way that they lived as well,
yeah,
it was
yeah.
because they questioned.
Yes, yeah, yeah. I think that that's, you see, we have to evolve. If you want to evolve, we have to question. And the questioning starts with us. We cannot say, oh, I am done. This is who I am. I'm not budging from the standpoint, and then think we're ever going to grow. We will never grow. That's not going to happen. So, the sooner we start really exploring ourselves and exploring those beliefs that we hold as the fundamental foundations of our being, our gender, our ethnicity, and all of that, we don't realize how much of baggage we are carrying until and unless we start questioning, and we realize that we can be so free when the real answers come from within us. So I think I really love the fact that you brought in this whole concept of Ubuntu into this conversation, that you've taken it away from ticking lists and ticking checks boxes and placing expectations on people and saying, please go back into your hearts and look at yourself and see how can you be a better human being for everybody, right?
Mm.
Thank you so much, Trevor. Before we sign off, I want you to tell the audience about your anthology. Where can they get it? How can they get access that copy?
Okay. So how you can access our beautiful anthology that speaks to the lived experiences, to the human experiences of humans in Zimbabwe and their diversity. You can
Mm-hmm.
get on our website, which is www.phatrust.org. And under latest news, there's a drop down which is written publications. You click on that, you'll find our book on that page. And please feel free to also share, like, the share your views on the book. And I think we're also going to try and make it available for download. And it's not for sale because these are
So, so what we're going to also do at the end of this conversation is drop the link to that page in the comments, so that anybody who's watching this live and is interested in accessing that, and I can tell you that anthology is beautiful. I've read a few pieces, few writings out of it. It's so poignant. It's like I said, it's all about humanity. It's way beyond gender and sexuality. It's really about humanity, and it is a must read for each and every one of us. I would just say that much about it. So we will drop a link to the either that page or the site, something that will easily where you can easily access it. And we hope you will pick it up, take a look at it, read it, share your thoughts, and of course support the fantastic work that Purple Land Africa is doing in this area. Before we sign out, Trevor, any last words?
Any last words? Okay, my last word, I think it just boils down to Ubuntu. Let us practice our Ubuntu in our everyday lives to make
Hmm.
this world a better place. And well, I know it's June Pride Month, but I'm sorry, I'm not going to raise the flag because I am colorful by myself. I raise myself, and I believe that everyone should just raise themselves as they are. That's it.
That's a
Thank
that's
you.
a that's a fantastic thought to wind up the evening on. I want to thank everybody who's been a part of this conversation. When I put announcements of this conversation out on social media, on my social handles, for the first time since we started Conversations from the Trenches, I actually had people reaching out and say, "Oh, this is very courageous." And I was a little flummoxed because I don't see why this is courageous. This is just a conversation that needs to be had over and over and over and over again. That's the way it feels to me. So I am very clearly I'm missing the memo that that a significant number of people are circulating, which I haven't gotten it as yet. But I want to say to everybody who's shown up today, thank you. Thank you very, very, very much from the bottom of both our hearts. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being a part of this conversation.